Welcome to the Monastery of Healing Rain, where sacred droplets carry the divine magic of peace and restoration for your soul. Tonight, let these ancient legends and gentle rain sounds guide you into a realm of deep tranquility and healing sleep. Chapter 1: The Legend of the Ancient Monastery. In the misty mountains of ancient times, where clouds kissed the earth and heaven seemed within reach, there lived a revered monk named Master Kenjiro. His name whispered through the valleys like a gentle breeze, carrying tales of his profound wisdom and compassionate heart. For decades, he had wandered the sacred peaks, seeking the perfect place where heaven and earth could unite in eternal harmony. Master Kenjiro possessed eyes that reflected the depth of ancient wisdom and hands weathered by countless years of prayer and meditation. His robes, simple yet elegant, bore the soft grey colour of morning mist, and wherever he walked, a sense of profound peace seemed to follow. The local villagers would often speak of how the very air grew calmer in his presence, as if nature itself recognized his sacred purpose. One evening, as autumn painted the mountainside in golden hues, Master Kenjiro climbed higher than he had ever ventured before. The path grew narrow and treacherous, with ancient pines standing as silent sentinels along his journey. The wind carried the scent of pine needles and the distant promise of rain. As darkness began to embrace the mountain, he discovered a plateau hidden among the peaks, a circular clearing surrounded by towering trees where the earth felt sacred beneath his feet. In the center of this mystical space stood a single ancient oak tree, its massive trunk bearing the wisdom of centuries. Its branches reached toward the heavens like arms raised in eternal prayer, while its roots delved deep into the earth's sacred core. As Master Kenjiro approached this magnificent tree, he felt a profound energy pulsing through the ground, as if the very heartbeat of the mountain resonated beneath his steps. The moon rose full and luminous that night, casting silver light across the clearing. Master Kenjiro knelt beneath the ancient oak and entered deep meditation. Hours passed like flowing water, and as dawn approached, he experienced a divine vision that would change the course of countless lives. In this vision, he saw streams of healing rain falling from the heavens, each droplet carrying the power to wash away suffering, anxiety, and restless nights. The vision showed him a monastery built in perfect harmony with nature. Stone walls that seemed to grow from the mountain itself, curved roofs that channeled rainwater into sacred pools, and meditation halls where the sound of rain would create a symphony of peace. He saw monks walking in silent contemplation through gardens where rain-fed streams flowed like liquid meditation, their gentle murmuring creating a constant backdrop of tranquility. But most remarkably, the vision revealed the true purpose of this sacred place. Master Kenjiro witnessed countless souls, travelers, villagers, and seekers from distant lands, arriving at the monastery carrying the heavy burdens of worry, sleeplessness, and spiritual suffering. As they listened to the healing rain and absorbed the monastery's peaceful energy, their troubles seemed to dissolve like morning mist replaced by deep restorative sleep and profound inner peace. When the vision ended, Master Kenjiro knew his life's mission had been revealed. With tears of gratitude streaming down his weathered face, he pressed his palms together and made a sacred vow to the universe. In this holy place, I shall build a sanctuary where the rain itself becomes medicine for troubled souls. May every droplet that falls here carry the power to heal anxiety, bring peaceful sleep, and restore the weary heart. The construction of the monastery began with a single stone. Master Kenjiro, despite his advanced age, carried each rock with his own hands, blessing every element that would become part of this sacred structure. Local villagers, inspired by his dedication and sensing the profound holiness of his mission, began to arrive daily to assist in the construction. They worked in reverent silence, understanding that they were participating in something far greater than mere building. They were creating a vessel for divine healing. The monastery's design reflected Master Kenjiro's divine vision with extraordinary precision. The main hall was constructed with acoustics that would amplify and purify the sound of rain, creating a natural concert hall where water's music could touch the deepest chambers of the human heart. The meditation chambers were positioned to catch the full symphony of rainfall, from the gentle patter on bamboo leaves to the deeper resonance of water flowing through carefully crafted stone channels. Gardens were planted with specific plants chosen for their ability to create soothing sounds when rain touched their laaves. Broad-leafed hostas provided deep, satisfying drops, while delicate ferns created whispered percussion. Bamboo groves were positioned to catch the wind and rain, adding their hollow musical notes to nature's healing orchestra. Every element was designed to transform rainfall from mere weather into a therapeutic experience. The construction continued through changing seasons, each bringing its own lessons and blessings. During spring, the workers discovered natural springs that bubbled up from deep within the mountain, providing pure water that seemed to carry the earth's own healing properties. Summer brought gentle rains that tested their architectural innovations, proving that the building's design would indeed amplify and beautify the sound of falling water. As autumn arrived again, painting the mountainside in brilliant reds and golds, the monastery neared completion. Master Kenjiro spent long hours in meditation, preparing himself for the sacred ritual that would consecrate his space and invite the healing rains to bless all who sought refuge here. He fasted for 7 days, drinking only the pure spring water and spending his nights in prayer beneath the ancient oak that had first revealed his vision. On the 7th night, as Master Kenjiro concluded his period of preparation, the first drops of rain began to fall on the completed monastery. The sound was everything his vision had promised and more, a gentle symphony that seemed to originate not just from the sky, but from the very soul of the mountain itself. As the rain intensified, the monastery's acoustic design revealed its full glory, transforming simple precipitation into a complex layered composition of healing sound. Master Kenjiro raised his arms to the rain-filled sky and spoke his final consecration. May this monastery stand as a beacon of peace for all who suffer from restless minds and sleepless nights. May the rain that falls here carry away anxiety as surely as it nourishes the earth. May all who listen to these sacred sounds find their way to deep healing sleep and wake refreshed in body, mind, and spirit. As his words echoed across the mountain plateau, the rain seemed to respond, falling with increased intensity and creating an even more beautiful symphony of healing sound. From that moment forward, the Monastery of Healing Rain began its eternal mission of bringing peace to troubled souls and sweet sleep to weary travelers. The first visitors arrived even before dawn, drawn by an inexplicable sense that something sacred and healing awaited them in the mountains. And indeed, as they listened to the rain on the monastery's specially designed roofs and walls, many experienced their first peaceful sleep in months or even years, awakening with renewed hope and profound gratitude for Master Kenjiro's blessed vision. Thus began the legend of the Monastery of Healing Rain, a sacred place where water's gentle music becomes medicine for the soul, and where the simple act of listening can transform anxiety into peace, wakefulness into rest, and suffering into serenity. Chapter 2. The First Healing Droplet. 3 days had passed since Master Kenjiro consecrated the Monastery of Healing Rain, and the mountain remained shrouded in gentle, persistent rainfall. The newly completed stone walls glistened with moisture, and every surface seemed to sing with the rhythm of descending water. Within the monastery's halls, the acoustic design proved its divine inspiration, as each droplet created layers of soothing melody that resonated deep into the human soul. On this third morning, as mist rose from the warm earth and merged with the cool mountain air, a lone figure appeared on the winding path leading to the monastery. Sister Mei Lin, a young nun from a distant temple, climbed slowly through the morning fog, her steps labored with exhaustion and her eyes reflecting weeks of sleepless nights. Dark circles shadowed her once bright face, and her hands trembled slightly as he gripped her walking staff. For months, Sister Mei Lin had been plagued by an affliction that no medicine could cure. Anxiety had crept into her heart like ivy into a garden, growing stronger with each passing day until it choked out her peace and stole her sleep. Night after night, she lay awake in her temple bed, her mind racing with worried thoughts that spiraled endlessly like autumn leaves caught in a whirlwind. Her prayers, once sources of comfort, had become desperate pleas for rest that seemed to echo unanswered in the darkness. Fellow nuns at her temple had tried everything they could think of to help their suffering sister. They brewed calming teas from chamomile, and lavender offered gentle massages with oils infused with peaceful herbs, and even adjusted her daily meditation schedule to include more restorative practices. But nothing could quiet the storm that raged within her mind, and her sleeplessness only grew worse with each failed remedy. It was elder sister Yuki, the oldest and wisest nun at their temple, who first spoke of the mysterious monastery in the mountains. "I have heard whispers," she said one evening as they sat in the temple garden, "of a sacred place where the rain itself carries healing power. They say a holy monk has built a monastery where the very sound of water can calm the most troubled heart and bring sleep to the most restless mind." Sister Mei Lin had initially dismissed these words as mere folklore, but as her condition worsened and her desperation grew, she found herself drawn to the possibility that such a place might truly exist. After weeks of internal struggle, she finally decided to make the pilgrimage, carrying nothing but her simple traveling robes, a small bundle of provisions, and a heart full of hope mixed with doubt. The journey to the mountain had taken her 5 days, traveling on foot through valleys and forest paths, asking directions from villagers who spoke of the monastery with reverence and awe. Each person he encountered had stories to tell, of relatives who had visited the sacred place and returned home with peaceful hearts, of neighbors whose chronic insomnia had been cured by a single night of listening to the healing rain. Now, as Sister Mei Lin approached the monastery's entrance, she could hear the rain's symphony growing stronger with each step. The sound was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Not just the simple patter of water on stone, but a complex musical composition that seemed to speak directly to her weary soul. Her breathing, which had been shallow and anxious for months, began to deepen unconsciously as the monastery's healing influence reached out to embrace her. Master Kenjiro, who had been meditating in the main hall, sensed her approach before she reached the gates. Rising gracefully from his cushion, he walked to the entrance with steps that seemed to float above the wet stone floor. When he opened the heavy wooden doors, he found Sister Meilin standing in teehee, gentle rain tears mixing with droplets on her upturned face. "Welcome, daughter," Master Kenjiro said softly, his voice carrying the same soothing quality as the rain itself. "I see that suffering has brought you to our door, but I also see that healing awaits you here. Come, let the rain wash away your burdens." Without another word, he led her into the monastery's main hall, where the sound of rain created a cocoon of tranquility that immediately began to ease the tension in her shoulders. The hall was simple, yet profound, with smooth stone walls that channeled water's music and cushions arranged in a circle beneath a soaring ceiling designed to amplify every note of nature's healing symphony. "Sit," Master Kenjiro invited, gesturing to a cushion positioned where the rain's music was most pure and clear. "Close your eyes and let the water speak to your heart. Do not try to control your thoughts or force yourself to sleep. Simply listen and allow the rain to teach you its ancient wisdom." Sister Meilin settled onto the cushion with trembling legs, her body still carrying the accumulated fatigue of countless sleepless nights. As she closed her eyes and began to focus on the rain's rhythm, something extraordinary began to happen. The endless chatter of anxious thoughts that had plagued her mind for months started to quiet like birds settling into peaceful roosts as evening falls. The rain spoke to her in a language older than words, each droplet carrying a message of release and renewal. She heard the deep bass notes of water flowing through the monastery's stone channels, the mid-range percussion of drops on broad leaves in the garden, and the crystalline high notes of water falling into the carefully placed pools. Together, these sounds wove a tapestry of peace that began to wrap around her troubled spirit. Hours passed unnoticed as Sister Meilin surrendered to the rain's healing embrace. Master Kenjiro remained nearby, his own meditation, creating a protective field of serenity around the suffering nun. He had witnessed this process many times in his vision, but seeing it unfold in reality filled his heart with profound gratitude for the divine guidance that had led him to create this sacred space. As afternoon melted into evening, the rain intensified slightly, adding new layers to its healing composition. Sister Meilin felt her breathing become deeper and more rhythmic, matching the natural cadence of the falling water. The knots of tension that had lived in her muscles for months began to dissolve, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, her mind grew quiet and still. When twilight painted the sky in soft purples and grays, Sister Meilin experienced something miraculous. Her eyelids, heavy with the weight of accumulated exhaustion, but no longer held open by anxiety's cruel grip, finally closed in peaceful surrender. Her breathing slowed to match the gentle rhythm of the rain, and her hands, which had clenched in worry for so long, relaxed completely on her lap. Master Kenjiro watched in wonder as the first miracle of his monastery unfolded before his eyes. Sister Meilin's face which had been tight with worry and exhaustion, gradually softened into an expression of profound peace. The healing rain had found its mark, carrying away months of accumulated stress and anxiety as surely as water carries away dust from a well-worn path. Throughout that first night, Sister Mei-Lin slept as she had not slept since childhood, deeply, completely, and without interruption. Her dreams were filled with images of gentle rain falling on peaceful gardens, of streams flowing clear and cool through mountain meadows, and of her own heart finally finding rest after its long journey through darkness. Master Kenjiro remained in meditation throughout the night, his consciousness extending like a protective umbrella over his first patient. He could sense the profound healing taking place within her sleeping form, as if the very cells of her body were drinking in the peace that the rain provided. The monastery itself seemed to pulse with quiet joy, its stones and timbers resonating with the satisfaction of a purpose fulfilled. When dawn broke over the mountain peaks, painting the monastery walls with soft golden light, Sister Mei-Lin awoke naturally for the first time in months. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the gentle morning brightness, and for a moment she lay perfectly still, marveling at the profound sense of rest that filled her entire being. The anxiety that had been her constant companion was gone, washed away by the healing rain as completely as if it had never existed. Rising from her cushion with movements that felt fluid and graceful, Sister Mei-Lin bowed deeply to Master Kenjiro, who had remained in meditation nearby throughout her healing sleep. Tears of gratitude flowed freely down her cheeks as she realized that the miracle she had barely dared to hope for had actually occurred. "Master," she whispered, her voice clear and strong for the first time in months, "how can I ever thank you for this gift? The rain has given me back my life." Master Kenjiro smiled with infinite compassion. "Thank not me, dear sister, but the sacred waters that carry heaven's healing power. You have experienced the monastery's first miracle, but you will not be the last. The rain that healed you will heal countless others who arrive with heavy hearts and weary minds." As Sister Mei-Lin prepared to begin her journey home, carrying with her not only restored health, but also the profound knowledge that true healing was possible, Master Kenjiro knew that his life's work had truly begun. The Monastery of Healing Rain had proven its sacred purpose, and word of its miraculous power would soon spread to every corner of the land, bringing hope to all who suffered from anxiety's cruel grip and sleep's elusive embrace. The gentle rain continued to fall, each droplet now blessed with the knowledge that it carried within it the power to transform suffering into peace, restlessness into rest, and despair into hope. Chapter 3: The Meditation Master, Under Rain. In the weeks following Sister Mei-Lin's miraculous healing word of the Monastery of Healing, rain began to spread like ripples across a still pond. Travelers carried tales of the sacred place through mountain villages and bustling towns, speaking in hushed, reverent tones of the monk who had built a sanctuary where rain itself became medicine for troubled souls. Yet Master Kenjiro knew that his monastery's greatest test was yet to come. One autumn morning, as crimson leaves danced on the cool mountain breeze, a figure appeared on the monastery's winding path, unlike any visitor who had come before. This was Master Takeshi, a renowned meditation teacher from the ancient Temple of Endless Contemplation, whose reputation for spiritual discipline was legendary throughout the land. He had spent 30 years mastering the deepest forms of meditation, guiding countless students to enlightenment, and was revered as one of the most accomplished spiritual teachers of his generation. However, beneath Master Takeshi's serene exterior lay a profound spiritual crisis that had shaken him to his very core. For months, he had been unable to achieve the deep meditative states that had once come to him as naturally as breathing. His mind, usually as calm and clear as a mountain lake, had become turbulent with doubts and restless thoughts. Most troubling of all, he had begun to experience episodes of intense anxiety during meditation, something he had never encountered in his decades of practice. This anxiety manifested as a crushing weight on his chest, racing thoughts that refused to settle, and a profound sense of disconnection from the divine source that had always guided his spiritual journey. His students noticed the change in their beloved teacher, though he tried desperately to hide his inner turmoil. His meditation instructions, once flowing like clear water, became stilted and uncertain. His presence, which had formerly radiated unshakable peace, now carried an undercurrent of tension that his most sensitive disciples could detect. Master Takeshi had tried every meditation technique he knew, consulted with other spiritual masters, and even undergone traditional healing ceremonies, but nothing could restore his lost equanimity. The anxiety that plagued him seemed to grow stronger with each failed attempt to overcome it, creating a vicious cycle that threatened to destroy everything he had spent his life building. It was during this dark period that he heard whispers of the Monastery of Healing Rain. Initially, his scholarly pride resisted the idea that some unknown monk in the mountains could offer him anything he hadn't already learned from decades of intensive practice. But as his condition worsened and his desperation grew, he finally swallowed his pride and decided to make the pilgrimage to this mysterious sanctuary. When Master Takeshi arrived at the monastery, Master Kenjiro greeted him with the same gentle compassion he showed all visitors, though he sensed immediately that this man's suffering ran deeper than most. The visiting master's eyes, which should have reflected the clear depths of advanced meditation, instead showed the clouded confusion of a soul lost in spiritual wilderness. "I have come," Master Takeshi said with great difficulty, his voice barely above a whisper, "because I have lost my way. For 30 years I have guided others toward enlightenment, but now I cannot even find peace within my own mind. The anxiety that consumes me during meditation has made me question everything I thought I knew about the spiritual path." Master Kenjiro listened with infinite patience, recognizing in this accomplished teacher's suffering a reflection of his own former struggles. "Brother," he replied gently, "sometimes we must lose our way completely before we can find the true path. Your anxiety is not your enemy. It is your teacher pointing you toward a deeper understanding than you have ever known." "But how?" Master Takeshi asked, his composed demeanor cracking to reveal the raw desperation beneath. "How can this torment be anything but an obstacle to enlightenment?" "Come," Master Kenjiro said, leading him towards the monastery's meditation garden, where the sound of rain on carefully tended plants created a symphony of natural peace. "Let me show you a practice that goes beyond all techniques, beyond all methods you have learned. Here we do not fight anxiety. We invite it to dissolve in the healing presence of sacred rain." In the garden's center stood a simple meditation pavilion, its open sides allowing the full experience of rains while providing basic shelter. The structure was positioned where multiple water features converged. A natural spring bubbled up from the earth. Channeled rainwater flowed in gentle streams around the sitting area, and overhead the pavilion's roof collected and directed rainfall to create cascading water curtains on all sides. This, Master Kenjiro explained, is where you will undertake the rain meditation of ultimate surrender. It requires not 49 days of fighting your inner storms, but 49 days of letting the rain wash them away. You will sit here through sun and storm day and night, allowing the water's eternal wisdom to teach you what no book or teacher ever could. Master Takeshi's analytical mind immediately began to resist. 49 days of continuous meditation seemed excessive, almost barbaric compared to the refined practices he had mastered. But something deeper within him, a voice he had not heard in months, whispered that this was exactly what he needed. "Will you guide me through this practice?" he asked. "The rain will be your only teacher," Master Kenjiro replied. "I will ensure your physical needs are met, but your spiritual journey must be undertaken alone. Trust in the water's ancient wisdom and let it show you what lies beyond anxiety, beyond technique, beyond everything you think you know about meditation." That very evening, as darkness settled over the mountain and gentle rain began to fall, Master Takeshi took his place in the meditation pavilion. He sat in the traditional cross-legged position he had maintained for thousands of hours throughout his life, but immediately noticed that something was different. The constant sound of falling water created an environment unlike any meditation space he had ever experienced. At first, his scholarly mind tried to analyze and categorize the experience. He noted the different tones created by rain falling on various surfaces, the rhythmic patterns in the water's flow, the way humidity affected his breathing. But as the night deepened and the rain continued its gentle assault on his preconceptions, these analytical thoughts began to fade. By the third day, Master Takeshi encountered the first major challenge of his retreat. The anxiety that had plagued him for months erupted with unprecedented intensity, triggered by the unfamiliar environment and the vulnerability of sitting completely exposed to the elements. His heart raced, his breathing became shallow, and waves of panic crashed over him like storm surges against a rocky shore. But instead of fighting these feelings or trying to escape them, Master Takeshi remembered Master Kenjiro's words about surrender. As rain continued to fall around him, he began to imagine each droplet carrying away a piece of his anxiety. He visualized his racing thoughts being washed down the mountain streams, his tension dissolving like salt in water, his fear evaporating like mist in the morning sun. The rain responded to his surrender with increased intensity, as if nature itself was eager to participate in his healing. For hours he sat in the downpour, letting water run through his hair, soak his robes, and create pools around his meditation cushion. With each drop that too shed his skin, he felt a tiny piece of his suffering wash away. By the end of the first week, something remarkable began to happen. The anxiety attacks that had tormented him for months started to decrease in both intensity and frequency. Instead of fighting the feelings when they arose, he had learned to let them pass through him like rain through a mountain valley. His meditation, which had become a battlefield between his will and his worries, transformed into a peaceful collaboration with the natural world. The second week brought deeper insights. Master Takeshi began to understand that his years of intensive meditation practice had actually created a subtle form of spiritual pride that had separated him from the simple, direct experience of the present moment. He had become so focused on achieving specific states of consciousness that he had forgotten how to simply be present with whatever was actually happening. The rain taught him a different way. Water doesn't try to be wet. Its supply is wet. Clouds don't effort to produce rain. They naturally release what they contain. In the same way, Master Takeshi began to discover that true meditation wasn't about producing specific experiences or states, but about naturally releasing whatever was present without resistance. As the third week unfolded, his practice deepened beyond anything he had previously imagined possible. The boundaries between himself and the rain began to dissolve. He could no longer tell where his breathing ended and the rhythm of falling water began. His thoughts, instead of arising as separate entities to be observed or controlled, flowed like streams merging into a greater river of consciousness. During the fourth week, Master Takeshi experienced what he would later describe as the most profound spiritual opening of his life. In the depths of a particularly intense rainstorm, as thunder rolled across the mountain peaks and lightning illuminated the night sky, he felt his individual identity completely dissolve into the vast ocean of existence. For several hours, there was no separate self experiencing rain. There was only rain experiencing itself through the temporarily organized collection of matter and consciousness that had been called Master Takeshi. When this oceanic consciousness eventually reorganized itself back into individual awareness, Master Takeshi found that the anxiety which had plagued him for months had been completely washed away. But more than that, he had discovered a capacity for healing others that went far beyond anything his previous training had provided. In the remaining weeks of his retreat, he began to understand that his own suffering had been preparation for a greater service. The rain had not only healed his anxiety, but had awakened within him the ability to create healing environments for others. He could now sense the specific sounds, rhythms, and energies that different individuals needed for their own healing journey. When Master Takeshi finally rose from his 49-day meditation on the morning of the 50th day, Master Kenjiro was waiting with dry robes and a warm meal. But what struck the monastery's founder most powerfully was the transformed presence of this accomplished teacher. Where before there had been subtle tension and hidden worry, now there radiated a peace so profound that it seemed to calm the very air around him. "Brother," Master Kenjiro said with deep respect, "you have become something beyond what either of us imagined possible. The rain has not only healed you, it has made you a healer." Master Takeshi bowed deeply, his eyes shining with grateful tears. "The water has taught me that true healing comes not from our efforts to fix what is broken, but from our willingness to let the natural flow of existence wash away everything that was never real to begin with. I understand now why this monastery was meant to be built, and I know my purpose is to help others discover the same healing that has transformed my life." From that day forward, Master Takeshi remained at the Monastery of Healing Rain, becoming Master Kenjiro's closest collaborator in developing specific meditation practices that combined the healing power of water sounds with advanced techniques for releasing anxiety and achieving deep restorative sleep. His transformation from a spiritually accomplished but secretly troubled teacher into a master of rain-based healing meditation became one of the monastery's most inspiring legends, proving that even the most advanced practitioners could discover new depths of wisdom through surrender to nature's ancient teachings. Chapter 4. The Girl Who Lost Her Dreams. As spring awakened the mountain with delicate wildflowers and fresh green leaves, a story began to unfold that would touch the hearts of everyone at the Monastery of Healing Rain. It was the tale of Akiko, a young woman of merely 22 years, who arrived at the monastery's gates carrying a burden that seemed far too heavy for her slender shoulders to bear. Akiko had once been known throughout her village as the girl who could sleep anywhere. As a child, she would curl up like a cat in the afternoon sun, napping peacefully in gardens, under trees, or even in the hard wooden floors of her family's humble home. Her mother used to joke that Akiko could fall asleep standing up if she was tired enough, and her dreams were so vivid and beautiful that she would often share them at breakfast, painting magical pictures with her words that delighted her entire family. But that was before the tragedy that shattered her peaceful world. 2 years earlier, a devastating fire had swept through their village during a particularly dry summer. The flames, driven by fierce winds, had consumed nearly everything in their path, including Akiko's family home. Though she and her parents had escaped with their lives, many of their neighbors had not been so fortunate. The screams of that terrible night, the orange glow of destruction, and the acrid smell of smoke had burned themselves into Akiko's memory so deeply that they now haunted her every attempt to sleep. From that night forward, sleep became Akiko's enemy. The moment she closed her eyes, the traumatic memories would surge back with overwhelming intensity. She would see flames dancing behind her eyelids, hear the terrified cries of her neighbors, and smell the choking smoke that had filled the air. Her heart would race. Her breathing would become shallow and panicked, and sleep would flee from her like a frightened bird. At first, her family thought her insomnia was a natural response to trauma that would fade with time. They tried every remedy their village healer could suggest. Warm milk infused with honey teas made from valerian root and chamomile, essential oils of lavender rubbed on her temples and wrists. But nothing worked. As weeks turned to months and months turned to years, Akiko's sleeplessness became a defining feature of her existence. The lack of sleep began to take a devastating toll on every aspect of her life. Her once bright eyes became hollow and rimmed with dark circles that made her look decades older than her actual age. Her skin, which had previously glowed with youthful health, became pale and drawn. Most heartbreaking of all, her vibrant personality, once filled with laughter, creativity, and boundless energy, slowly dimmed like a candle burning down to its final wick. Akiko's parents watched helplessly as their beloved daughter became a shadow of her former self. She would spend entire nights sitting by her window staring out at the darkness, with eyes that saw not the peaceful village that had been rebuilt, but the flames that lived forever in her memory. During the day, she moved through her daily tasks like a sleepwalker, functioning but not truly living. The village physician, a kind elderly man who had treated Akiko since childhood, finally admitted that her condition was beyond his abilities to heal. "This is not a sickness of the body," he told her parents with deep sadness. "This is a wound of the spirit, and it requires healing that goes deeper than any medicine I can provide." It was Akiko's grandmother, a woman of great wisdom who had lived through many hardships in her 90 years, who first mentioned the Monastery of Healing Rain. "I have heard tell," she said one evening, as the family gathered for their simple dinner, "of a sacred place in the mountains where the very sound of rain can heal the deepest wounds of the heart and mind. They say a holy monk has built a sanctuary where troubled souls can find the peace that has been stolen from them." Akiko's father immediately dismissed such talk as mere superstition, but her mother felt a stirring of hope in her chest. She had watched her daughter suffer for so long that she was willing to try anything, even if it seemed too miraculous to be true. After weeks of gentle persuasion, she finally convinced her husband to allow Akiko to make the journey to this mysterious monastery. The trip to the mountains was arduous for someone in Akiko's weakened condition. She had not experienced a full night's sleep in nearly 2 years, and her body was running on pure determination rather than physical strength. Her mother accompanied her for the first part of the journey. But when they reached the base of the sacred mountain, an inner knowing told Akiko that she needed to complete this pilgrimage alone. With every step up the winding mountain path, Akiko felt as though she was climbing not just toward a distant monastery, but toward some form of salvation that she could not yet comprehend. The forest around her seemed alive with a peaceful energy that she had not experienced since before the fire. Birds sang in the trees above, streams babbled alongside the path, and the very air seemed charged with hope. As she climbed higher, afternoon clouds began to gather overhead, and the first drops of rain started to fall. For most people, this would have been an inconvenience, but for Akiko, something extraordinary happened. The sound of raindrops hitting the leaves above her head created a gentle rhythm that seemed to speak directly to her traumatized nervous system. For the first time in months, her racing heart began to slow, and her shallow breathing deepened naturally. By the time she reached the monastery's entrance, a steady rain was falling, and Akiko was amazed to discover that instead of triggering her usual anxiety, the sound of water was actually calming her frayed nerves. Master Kenjiro, who had been expecting her arrival through means he could not explain even to himself, opened the monastery doors before she could knock. "Welcome, daughter," he said softly, his voice carrying the same soothing quality as the rain itself. "I see that sleep has abandoned you, but I also see that healing rains have already begun their work. Come, let us introduce you to the practice that will restore your dreams." Master Kenjiro led Akiko to a special chamber that had been prepared specifically for visitors suffering from severe insomnia. The room was small and womb-like, with walls designed to create the most perfect acoustic environment for experiencing the healing power of rain. A comfortable sleeping mat lay in the center, surrounded by carefully positioned water features that created layers of gentle sound. "This," Master Kenjiro explained, "is where you will learn to sleep again. But first, you must understand that your insomnia is not your enemy. It has been your mind's way of trying to protect you from reliving trauma. We will not fight your sleeplessness. Instead, we will teach it that it is safe to let go." Over the following days, Master Kenjiro and Master Takeshi worked together to create a specialized healing program for Akiko. They had learned from their previous successes that different types of suffering required different approaches to treatment. Akiko's trauma-based insomnia would need a careful, gradual process that honored her nervous system's protective mechanisms while gently encouraging them to release their vigilant grip. The treatment began with simple exposure to the monastery's healing rain sounds during daylight hours. Akiko would sit in the main meditation hall, listening to the complex symphony of water without any pressure to sleep or even relax. The goal was simply to retrain her nervous system to associate the sound of water with safety rather than danger. At first, even this gentle approach triggered memories of the fire. The sound of rain reminded her of the hissing and crackling of flames, and she would experience panic attacks that left her gasping for breath. But Master Kenjiro and Master Takeshi remained patient and supportive, helping her understand that these reactions were a normal part of the healing process. "Your mind has learned to be afraid," Master Kenjiro explained during one of their daily sessions. "It associates all unexpected sounds with danger because it is trying to keep you safe. We must teach it very slowly and gently that the sound of rain is different from the sound of fire." The breakthrough came during Akiko's second week at the monastery. She had been sitting in the rain meditation chamber, listening to the gentle patter of water on the specially designed roof, when suddenly she heard something that stopped her breath. Beneath the sound of rain, she detected the unmistakable rhythm of a heartbeat, not her own racing heart, but the slow, steady pulse of the earth itself. This discovery triggered a profound realization. The sound that she had been interpreting as threatening was actually the most nurturing sound in existence. The sound of life-giving water returning to the earth, the sound of renewal and growth, the sound of the planet's own breathing. For the first time since the fire, Akiko felt truly safe. That night, she experienced something that had seemed impossible for nearly 2 years. As she lay on her sleeping mat surrounded by the gentle symphony of healing rain, her eyelids began to grow heavy. The sound that had once triggered panic now felt like a lullaby sung by the voice of nature itself. Her breathing slowed to match the rhythm of falling water, and gradually, miraculously, she drifted into sleep. The dream that came to her that night was unlike any she had experienced since childhood. Instead of flames and smoke, she found herself in a beautiful garden where gentle rain was nurturing thousands of flowers into bloom. The water was washing away all traces of ash and destruction, revealing underneath a landscape more beautiful than anything she had ever imagined. When Akiko awoke the next morning, she discovered that she had slept for 12 consecutive hours. The longest stretch of uninterrupted rest she had enjoyed since the fire. More importantly, she awoke feeling refreshed rather than exhausted, hopeful rather than despairing, and alive in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. Over the following weeks, Akiko's sleep gradually normalized as the monastery's healing rains continued their gentle work. She learned to associate the sound of water not with danger and destruction, but with peace, safety, and renewal. Her dreams returned, but not the vivid, creative visions of her childhood, but deeper, more healing dreams that seemed to repair the damaged places in her psyche. Master Kenjiro and Master Takeshi documented every aspect of Akiko's recovery, understanding that her case would provide valuable insights for helping other trauma survivors who had lost their ability to sleep. They discovered that the key was not to force relaxation, but to create an environment so inherently safe and nurturing that the nervous system could naturally let down its guard. As Akiko's physical health improved with regular sleep, her emotional and spiritual healing accelerated as well. She began to participate in the monastery's daily activities, helping with gardening, meditation, and even assisting with other visitors who came seeking relief from their own sleep disorders. Her gentle presence and deep understanding of insomnia's torment made her an invaluable counselor for others struggling with similar challenges. 3 months after her arrival, Akiko felt ready to return to her village, but she knew she would never be the same person who had climbed the mountain path in desperation. The monastery had not only restored her ability to sleep, but had awakened within her a calling to help others who suffered from trauma-related sleep disorders. Before departing, she spent one final night in the rain meditation chamber, listening to the healing waters that had saved her life. As she lay there in perfect peace, experiencing the deep restorative sleep that had once seemed impossible, she whispered a prayer of gratitude to the sacred rains and made a promise to share their healing power with anyone who needed it. Her story became one of the monastery's most celebrated miracles, proving that even the most severe trauma could be healed through patient, loving exposure to nature's own therapeutic wisdom. Akiko returned to her village as a living testament to the monastery's power, and her recovery inspired countless other trauma survivors to make their own pilgrimages to the sacred mountain where rain becomes medicine for wounded souls. Chapter 5. The warrior's broken shield. The autumn mists had barely lifted from the mountain valleys when a figure appeared on the monastery's path who carried within his very posture the weight of countless battles. This was Kenji, a former samurai whose name had once been spoken with reverence in the imperial court, but who now walked with the uncertain gait of a man whose inner compass had been shattered by experiences too terrible to speak aloud. Kenji had served as a military commander for over 15 years, leading troops through campaigns that had shaped the political landscape of their realm. His tactical brilliance was legendary, his courage in battle unquestionable, and his loyalty to his lord absolute. Soldiers under his command would follow him into the most dangerous situations because they trusted his judgment implicitly, and he had never led them astray. For more than a decade, he had been the perfect embodiment of the warrior's code, disciplined, fearless, and utterly devoted to duty above self. But wars have a way of consuming even the strongest souls, and the final campaign that had ended Kenji's military career had also destroyed something fundamental within his spirit. During a siege that lasted 3 brutal months, he had witnessed atrocities that no amount of training could have prepared him for. Friends had died in his arms, innocent civilians had suffered terribly, and he had been forced to make decisions that saved lives in the moment, but haunted his conscience forever. The breaking point had come during the siege's final night, when Kenji had been forced to choose between saving his trapped soldiers or protecting a group of defenseless villagers. In that moment of impossible decision, something inside him had cracked like a sword blade, stressed beyond its limits. He had saved the villagers, but the cost had been the lives of 12 men who had trusted him with their lives. When the war finally ended and Kenji returned to civilian life, he discovered that the peace he had fought so hard to secure was not available to him personally. Every night, the moment he closed his eyes, the battlefield came alive in his mind with terrifying clarity. He would hear the clash of weapons, smell the smoke of burning villages, and see the faces of those he had failed to save. Sleep became a battleground where he fought the same losing battles over and over again. The nightmares were so vivid and frequent that Kenji began to avoid sleep altogether, staying awake for days at a time until exhaustion forced him into brief tormented periods of unconsciousness filled with traumatic visions. His once powerful physique wasted away as chronic sleep deprivation took its toll. His hands, which had once wielded a sword with perfect precision, developed a tremor that made simple tasks difficult. Most devastating of all was the complete collapse of his ability to find peace in his own mind. Kenji had always prided himself on his mental discipline, his capacity to remain calm and focused under pressure. But now, his thoughts raced, constantly jumping from one worry to another, analyzing every sound for potential threats and replaying traumatic memories in an endless loop of self-torture. His family watched helplessly as this once great warrior became a shadow of his former self. His wife tried everything she could think of to help him, preparing special foods, creating peaceful environments in their home, even bringing in physicians and spiritual advisors. But nothing could reach the deep wound in Kenji's psyche, and gradually she realized that her presence was actually making things worse. The guilt he felt about his inability to be the husband and father he had once been only added to his suffering. It was during this dark period that Kenji heard whispers of the Monastery of Healing Rain from a fellow veteran who had found some measure of peace there. "Brother," the man had said, "I know you think you are beyond help, but there is a place in the mountains where even the deepest wounds of war can be healed. The rain that falls there washes away memories that torment us and brings sleep to those who have forgotten how to rest." Kenji's first instinct was to reject such claims as fantasy, but his desperation had grown so intense that he was willing to try anything. After months of internal struggle, he finally decided to make the pilgrimage to this mysterious monastery, carrying with him nothing but his traveling clothes and a heart full of pain that seemed too vast for any earthly remedy to address. The journey to the mountain took him through our landscapes that should have been beautiful, but which his traumatized mind interpreted as potential battlefields. Every forest could hide enemies, every valley could become a killing ground, every mountain pass could turn into a deadly trap. By the time he reached the monastery's gates, Kenji was in a state of hypervigilance so intense that he jumped at the sound of his own footsteps. Master Kenjiro sensed Kenji's arrival long before the former warrior appeared on the monastery's path. The spiritual disruption caused by such intense trauma created ripples that could be felt by anyone attuned to the subtle energies of consciousness. When he opened the monastery doors, he found Kenji standing in the gentle evening rain, his body rigid with tension despite the obvious exhaustion that weighted his every movement. "Welcome, warrior," Master Kenjiro said softly, using the title not as a reminder of past glory, but as recognition of the battles Kenji continued to fight within his own mind. "I see that you carry wounds that go deeper than flesh, and I know that sleep has become your enemy rather than your friend. Come, let the healing rains teach you what no military strategy ever could, how to surrender." The word surrender hit Kenji like a physical blow. His entire identity had been built around never giving up, never yielding, always fighting until victory was achieved. The idea of surrender felt like the ultimate betrayal of everything he had ever stood for. But Master Kenjiro's gentle presence and the soothing sound of rain on the monastery's ancient stones created an environment where even such fundamental resistance could begin to soften. Master Kenjiro led Kenji to a meditation chamber specifically designed for visitors carrying the trauma of warfare. The room was positioned where the sound of rain created a protective cocoon of white noise that could mask the sudden sounds that often triggered combat veterans' startled responses. The walls were thick enough to muffle any unexpected noises from outside, and the lighting was kept dim and stable to avoid the harsh contrasts that could trigger flashbacks. "Sit," Master Kenjiro invited, gesturing to a cushion positioned where the rain's music was most gentle and consistent. "Your mind has learned to be constantly on guard because that vigilance had once saved your life and the lives of others. We will not try to take away that protective instinct. Instead, we will teach it when it is safe to rest." For the first several days, Kenji could not sit still for more than a few minutes at a time. Every sound, the drip of water from the eaves, the whisper of wind through the trees, even the monastery's own settling noises, caused him to tense for action. His sleep, when it came at all, was broken and filled with nightmares that left him more exhausted than when he had lain down. Master Takeshi, whose own experience with spiritual crisis had prepared him for working with different types of suffering, began to collaborate with Master Kenjiro in developing a specialized approach for Kenji's war trauma. They understood that the hypervigilance that tormented him had once been a necessary survival tool, and that healing would require not the elimination of this instinct, but its careful recalibration. The breakthrough came during Kenji's second week at the monastery during a particularly intense rainstorm that transformed the mountain into a symphony of water sounds. As thunder rolled across the peaks and rain drummed against the monastery's walls, Kenji experienced something unexpected. Instead of triggering memories of battle, the storm's controlled chaos began to feel strangely comforting. For the first time since his military service had ended, Kenji found himself in an environment where constant sound and movement felt natural rather than threatening. The rain created a kind of controlled battlefield where nothing dangerous could approach unheard, where every sound had a natural explanation, and where his vigilant mind could finally relax without feeling that it was abandoning its protective duties. As the storm continued through the night, Kenji made a discovery that would transform his entire relationship with sleep. He realized that his insomnia was not just caused by traumatic memories, but by the profound silence of peaceful nights that felt wrong to a mind trained to sleep in war zones, where silence often meant danger. The constant, predictable sound of rain created the auditory environment his nervous system needed to feel safe enough for rest. That night, for the first time in over a year, Kenji slept for 6 consecutive hours without nightmares. He awoke feeling disoriented, but genuinely rested, as if some fundamental healing had begun during those hours of rain-protected sleep. The dark circles under his eyes had lightened slightly, and his hands seemed steadier than they had been in months. Over the following weeks, Master Kenjiro and Master Takeshi worked with Kenji to understand exactly what aspects of the rain sounds were most healing for his particular type of trauma. They discovered that he responded best to consistent rhythmic water sounds that masked other environmental noises without becoming monotonous. The complex layering of rainfall on different surfaces created an auditory environment rich enough to occupy his vigilant mind, while predictable enough to allow deep relaxation. As Kenji's sleep gradually normalized, other aspects of his healing began to accelerate. His appetite returned, and with it came the physical strength he had lost during months of insomnia. His hands grew steady again, and his posture began to reflect confidence rather than defensive readiness. Most remarkably, he began to experience periods during meditation when his mind grew genuinely quiet. Not the enforced silence of military discipline, but the natural stillness that comes when consciousness feels truly safe. The most profound transformation came during Kenji's 6th week at the monastery, when he volunteered to help with the physical maintenance of the buildings during a major storm. As he worked alongside the monks to secure shutters and direct rainwater away from vulnerable areas, he realized that he was experiencing something he had not felt since before the war. The satisfaction of protecting something beautiful rather than destroying something threatening. This shift in perspective opened the door to the final phase of his healing. Working with Master Takeshi in intensive meditation sessions, Kenji began to process the traumatic memories that had been tormenting him. But instead of reliving them as sources of guilt and pain, he learned to see them through the lens of compassion, understanding that he had done his best in impossible circumstances, and that the suffering he carried was itself a form of love for those he had been unable to save. The rain sounds provided the perfect backdrop for this deep emotional work. The constant gentle noise created a sense of privacy and safety that allowed Kenji to access feelings he had been avoiding for years. As he wept for his fallen comrades, grieved for the innocent victims of war, and finally forgave himself for the choices he had been forced to make, the healing rains seemed to wash away layers of accumulated pain. By the time spring arrived at the monastery, Kenji had undergone a transformation so complete that he barely resembled the broken warrior who had first climbed the mountain path. His sleep was deep and restorative, his mind was calm and focused, and his heart had opened again to the possibility of peace. But perhaps most importantly, he had discovered a new sense of purpose. Kenji chose to remain at the monastery as a permanent resident, dedicating himself to helping other veterans who arrived carrying similar wounds. His direct experience of combat trauma, combined with his training in the monastery's healing methods, made him uniquely qualified to guide other warriors through their own journeys, from sleepless torment to peaceful rest. Under his guidance, the monastery developed specialized programs for military veterans, creating environments and practices specifically designed to address combat-related insomnia and anxiety. His work became so renowned that former soldiers began making pilgrimages to the mountain from distant lands, knowing that they would find not only healing rain sounds, but also the understanding of someone who had walked the same dark path. Kenji's transformation from a broken warrior to a healer of warriors became one of the monastery's most inspiring stories, proving that even the deepest psychological wounds could be healed through patient exposure to nature's therapeutic wisdom. His presence at the monastery ensured that no veteran would have to face their healing journey alone, and his success inspired hope in even the most severely traumatized souls who sought refuge in the sacred sound of healing rain. The monastery's reputation as a sanctuary for those whose sleep had been stolen by trauma continued to grow, drawing visitors from across the realm who carried wounds invisible to the eye but devastating to the spirit. And in each case, the gentle persistence of falling water proved capable of washing away even the most stubborn memories, restoring peace to minds that had forgotten how to rest. Chapter 6. The Lesson of the Single. Drop high above the monastery of healing rain, where the mountain peaks touched the realm of clouds, there lived an ancient hermit named Elder Yasuda. For over 40 years, he had dwelt in a simple cave carved into the living rock, surviving on mountain herbs and spring water, seeking enlightenment through the most austere forms of spiritual practice. His reputation for wisdom was legendary among the few who knew of his existence, but his methods were so severe that even the most dedicated spiritual seekers rarely attempted to study with him. Elder Yasuda had achieved remarkable states of consciousness through his decades of solitary practice, but there was one aspect of enlightenment that had always eluded him: the ability to find peace in the present moment. His mind, honed sharp by years of intense meditation, had become like a perfectly crafted blade that could cut through the deepest philosophical questions, but could never simply rest in the gentle stillness of what is. This restlessness manifested as a peculiar form of spiritual insomnia. Elder Yasuda could meditate for days without moving, could fast for weeks without discomfort, and could remain silent for months without effort. But when he tried to simply be present with ordinary experience, the feeling of breath moving in and out of his body, the sensation of sunlight warming his skin, the sound of wind moving through the mountain pines, his mind would immediately begin analyzing, categorizing, and seeking deeper meaning. This constant mental activity prevented him from experiencing the profound rest that comes not from the absence of thought, but from the complete acceptance of whatever thoughts arise. His sleep, when it came, was filled with complex philosophical dreams that left him more mentally fatigued than when he had lain down. He had begun to suspect that his very pursuit of enlightenment had become an obstacle to the simple peace he sought. It was during the spring of his 41st year in the mountains that Elder Yasuda first became aware of the Monastery of Healing Rain. From his cave high above the valley, he could sometimes hear the faint sound of bells carried on the wind, and on clear days he could see the monastery's curved roofs gleaming in the sunlight far below. But what drew his attention most powerfully was something he sensed rather than saw. A quality of peace emanating from that distant sanctuary that seemed different from anything he had encountered in his decades of spiritual seeking. Initially, Elder Yasuda dismissed any thought of visiting the Monastery. His pride as a solitary practitioner made him reluctant to admit that he might learn something from monks who lived in community rather than in the austere isolation he had chosen. But as months passed and his restlessness continued to torment him, he began to consider the possibility that his hermit's path might have reached its natural limits. The decision to descend from his mountain cave was not made lightly. For Elder Yasuda, it represented a fundamental shift in his understanding of spiritual practice. An acknowledgement that true wisdom might sometimes require humility rather than heroic self-reliance. After weeks of contemplation, he finally began the long journey down the mountain paths he had not walked in over 4 decades. The descent was more challenging than Elder Yasuda had anticipated. His body adapted to the thin air and sparse conditions of high altitude. Living struggled with the richer atmosphere and more abundant energy of lower elevations. By the time he reached the monastery's gates, he was exhausted in a way that no amount of fasting or meditation had ever made him feel. Master Kenjiro sensed the approach of this unusual visitor long before Elder Yasuda appeared on the monastery's path. The spiritual signature of someone who had spent decades in intensive solitary practice was unmistakable. Powerful, but somehow incomplete, like a river that had carved a deep channel but never learned to flow gently across open meadows. When Elder Yasuda finally stood before the monastery's entrance, Master Kenjiro was struck by the contradiction he embodied. Here was a man whose spiritual achievements were clearly profound. His presence radiated the unmistakable authority of someone who had touched deep states of consciousness. Yet, his eyes held a restlessness that spoke of a fundamental dissatisfaction, as if all his years of practice had brought him to the edge of a great understanding that remained just out of reach. "Welcome, elder brother," Master Kenjiro said, with deep respect bowing low to acknowledge the hermit's spiritual accomplishments. "I sense that you have climbed mountains of consciousness that few dare to attempt. What brings you down from those lofty peaks to our humble sanctuary?" Elder Yasuda found himself surprisingly moved by this simple greeting. After decades of solitude, the warmth of genuine human recognition touched something in his heart that he had almost forgotten existed. "I have come," he said with characteristic directness, "because 40 years of seeking enlightenment have brought me everywhere except to the place where I can simply rest in this moment. I have heard that your reign teaches lessons that cannot be learned through effort alone." Master Kenjiro nodded with understanding. He had encountered this paradox before in highly accomplished practitioners. The very intensity of their seeking often created a subtle resistance to the simple presence they were trying to achieve. "Come," he said gently, "let me show you something that may seem too elementary for someone of your attainments, but which contains a teaching that goes deeper than any philosophy." He led Elder Yasuda to a small garden behind the monastery's main hall, where a simple stone basin collected rainwater from a bamboo spout. The arrangement was so modest that it might have been overlooked entirely, but Master Kenjiro positioned himself beside it with the reverence one might show to the most sacred altar. "This," he said, gesturing to the humble water feature, "is where you will learn the lesson of the single drop, not through any complex practice or profound meditation, but simply by watching water fall one drop at a time until you understand what patience truly means." Elder Yasuda's first reaction was barely concealed irritation. After 4 decades of the most demanding spiritual practices, the idea that he could learn anything from watching water drip seemed almost insulting. But something in Master Kenjiro's presence prevented him from voicing this objection. Instead, he settled cross-legged beside the basin and began to observe. At first, Elder Yasuda's trained mind immediately began analyzing what he saw. He noted the precise interval between drops, calculated the rate of flow, observed how surface tension formed each droplet before it fell. His intellectual brilliance turned even this simple exercise into a complex study of physics and fluid dynamics. But as hours passed and the drops continued their patient descent, something unexpected began to happen. The rhythm of falling water began to work on Elder Yasuda's consciousness in ways that no amount of forceful meditation had ever achieved. Each drop was identical in its essential nature, water returning to water, yet each was also completely unique in its exact size, timing, and trajectory. This paradox of sameness and uniqueness began to mirror something he recognized in his own spiritual experience. By the end of the first day, Elder Yasuda noticed that his mind's constant analytical chatter had begun to quiet, not through any effort on his part, but simply through prolonged exposure to the drop's patient rhythm. The water seemed to be teaching him something about the relationship between persistence and surrender. Each drop fell not through force, but through the natural action of gravity. Yet this gentle persistence could over time carve channels through solid stone. As days turned into weeks, Elder Yasuda's practice with the water basin deepened in ways he had never anticipated. He began to see that each falling drop was a perfect teacher of presence. It arose in its own time, existed fully in the moment of its falling, and released completely into the water below without clinging to its individual identity. This simple lesson in non-attachment was more profound than any philosophical treatise he had ever studied. The real breakthrough came during Elder Yasuda's third week of drop meditation during a gentle Ra'a storm that increased the flow from the bamboo spout. As he sat watching the accelerated rhythm of falling water, he suddenly understood something that transformed his entire relationship with spiritual practice. The drops were not trying to fall. They simply followed their nature. They were not seeking to become something other than what they already were. They were expressing their essential waterness with complete authenticity. This realization hit Elder Yasuda with the force of lightning illuminating a dark landscape. For 40 years, he had been trying to become enlightened, efforting toward awakening, seeking to transform himself into something other than what he naturally was. But the drops were showing him a different way, the path of simply being what he already was, without resistance, without seeking, without the exhausting effort to become something else. That night, for the first time in decades, Elder Yasuda experienced what he would later describe as effortless sleep. Instead of the complex philosophical dreams that usually filled his rest periods, he slept with the same natural ease that water flows downhill. His mind, no longer striving to achieve special states or profound insights, settled into the simple rhythm of breathing and being. When he awoke the next morning, Elder Yasuda discovered that the restlessness that had tormented him for so long had been replaced by a quality of presence he had never known before. His awareness was still sharp and clear, but it no longer felt like a sword cutting through experience. Instead, it felt like water itself, fluid, adaptable, able to take the shape of whatever container it found itself in, while never losing its essential nature. Master Kenjiro found him still sitting beside the water basin, but there was something fundamentally different about his presence. Where before there had been the taut energy of someone striving for spiritual achievement, now there radiated the peaceful authority of someone who had stopped fighting with reality and learned to flow with it instead. Elder brother, Master Kenjiro said softly, "I see that the drops have taught you their most important lesson." Elder Yasuda looked up with eyes that sparkled with gentle humor, an expression that had been absent from his severe countenance for decades. "They have taught me," he said, "that I was already what I was seeking to become. All my efforts to achieve enlightenment were like a wave trying to become wet. The water was always water, whether it fell as a single drop or flowed as a mighty river." This insight marked the beginning of Elder Yasuda's transformation from a solitary seeker into a teacher of gentle presence. He chose to remain at the monastery not as a student, but as a collaborator in developing practices that could help other highly accomplished practitioners who had become trapped in their own spiritual efforts. Working closely with Master Kenjiro and Master Takeshi, Elder Yasuda began to articulate the profound lessons that could be learned from observing the natural world with patient attention. He developed a series of meditations based on different aspects of water's behavior: the persistence of the single drop, the adaptability of flowing streams, the power of patient accumulation over time. His teachings particularly benefited visitors who came to the monastery carrying the burden of spiritual perfectionism. Practitioners who had become so focused on achieving special states of consciousness that they had lost touch with the simple peace available in ordinary moments. Under Elder Yasuda's guidance, these driven seekers learned to approach their spiritual practice with the same natural ease that water approaches its return to the sea. The lesson of the single drop became one of the monastery's most profound offerings, taught not through complex instructions but through simple observation of water's natural behavior. Visitors would spend days or weeks sitting beside various water features throughout the monastery grounds, learning patience from drops, persistence from streams, and acceptance from pools that reflected whatever sky happened to be above them. Elder Yasuda's presence at the monastery also attracted a new category of visitors: advanced practitioners from temples and monasteries throughout the land who had achieved high levels of spiritual development but found themselves stuck in subtle forms of effort and seeking. These accomplished meditators discovered that the monastery's simple water practices could unlock doors that years of intensive effort had failed to open. Perhaps most remarkably, Elder Yasuda's own sleep became a teaching in itself. Visitors would often comment on the profound peace that radiated from the simple hut where he rested each night. His sleep had become so natural and effortless that it seemed to create a field of tranquility that helped others release their own struggles with insomnia and restlessness. The story of Elder Yasuda's transformation became a beloved part of the monastery's oral tradition, reminding all who heard it that sometimes the most profound spiritual achievements come not through heroic effort, but through the simple willingness to stop fighting and start flowing. His example showed that even the most advanced practitioners could discover new depths of peace by learning to approach their spiritual life with the same patient, natural persistence demonstrated by a single drop of falling water. Years later, when visitors asked Elder Yasuda to summarize the essence of what he had learned from the monastery's healing rains, he would simply point to the water basin where his transformation had begun and say, "Watch long enough, and the drops will teach you everything you need to know about the art of being perfectly yourself." Chapter 7: The 7 Days of Moonlit Rain. In the Chronicles of the Monastery of Healing Rain, there exists an account of 7 extraordinary days that would forever hang the understanding of how celestial rhythms interact with earthly healing. This miraculous period began during the autumn equinox when the harvest moon rose full and luminous over the mountain peaks, its silver light creating an otherworldly atmosphere that seemed to amplify the monastery's already powerful healing properties. Master Kenjiro had observed many full moons during his years at the monastery, but this particular lunar cycle felt different from the moment it began. The air itself seemed charged with an unusual energy, and the monks noticed that the monastery's water features produced sounds of exceptional clarity and resonance. Even the ancient stones of the building seemed to hum with a subtle vibration that harmonized perfectly with the rhythm of falling rain. What made this period truly extraordinary was not just the full moon's radiance, but the unprecedented weather pattern that accompanied it. As the moon reached its peak, fullness, clouds began to gather over the mountain in spiraling formations that resembled enormous prayer wheels slowly turning in the sky. These clouds brought rain, but not the usual mountain showers that came and went with the changing winds. Instead, they settled over the monastery like a gentle blessing that would persist for 7 complete days and nights. The rain that fell during this mystical week possessed qualities that even Master Kenjiro, with all his experience of the monastery's healing waters, had never encountered before. Each droplet seemed to carry not only the usual therapeutic properties of mountain rain, but also something of the moon's own peaceful energy. The water appeared to glow with a soft silver luminescence that was visible even during daylight hours, and its sound created harmonies that resonated at frequencies known to induce the deepest possible states of healing sleep. Word of this celestial phenomenon spread quickly beyond the monastery's walls, carried by mountain winds and whispered through valleys by travelers who glimpsed the silvery glow emanating from the sacred peak. Within days, pilgrims began arriving from distant provinces, drawn by an inexplicable sense that something momentous was occurring at the monastery. Many reported experiencing vivid dreams about healing rain and moonlight even before they consciously decided to make the journey. Among the early arrivals was Lady Natsuko, a noblewoman in her 50s who had been struggling with chronic insomnia for over a decade. Despite having access to the finest physicians and most luxurious accommodations in the land, she had not experienced a single night of truly restful sleep since her beloved husband's death 10 years earlier. Her grief had crystallized into a form of vigilant wakefulness that kept her consciousness hovering at the surface of awareness, unable to sink into the deeper layers of sleep where true restoration occurs. Lady Natsuko had initially approached the monastery with considerable skepticism, her aristocratic upbringing making her doubtful that simple rain sounds could accomplish what teams of court physicians had failed to achieve. But from the moment she stepped into the monastery's main hall during that first night of moonlit rain, she felt something shift in her very cells. The combination of the moon's silver radiance streaming through specially designed windows and the ethereal sound of luminescent raindrops created an environment unlike anything she had ever experienced. "This is not ordinary rain," she whispered to Master Kenjiro as they stood together in the main hall, watching the silvery droplets trace glowing paths down the windows. "It feels as though the moon itself is singing lullabies to the earth." Master Kenjiro nodded with deep reverence. "In our traditions, it is said that when the moon is full, the boundary between the earthly and celestial realms grows thin. Perhaps what we are witnessing is the moon sharing its own peaceful dreams with our healing waters." That first night, Lady Natsuko experienced something that 10 years of grief-induced insomnia had convinced her was no longer possible. As she lay in the special sleeping chamber that had been prepared for her, surrounded by the luminous sound of moonlit rain, her consciousness began to descend through layers of awareness she had forgotten existed. The gentle glow that suffused the room created a sense of being held within the moon's own loving embrace, while the rain's celestial song carried her deeper into sleep than she had traveled since her husband's passing. Her dreams that night were extraordinary. Instead of the usual landscape of loss and longing that had haunted her sleep for years, she found herself walking through gardens where moonbeams and raindrops danced together in perfect harmony. In these dreams, she encountered her deceased husband not as a source of sorrow, but as a presence of pure love that blessed her journey toward healing. When she awoke, after 12 hours of uninterrupted sleep, her face bore an expression of peace that her servants had not seen in a decade. As the second day of moonlit rain began, more pilgrims arrived at the monastery, each carrying their own burdens of sleeplessness and anxiety. There was Master Chen, an elderly scholar whose mind had become so active with accumulated knowledge that it could no longer rest. Young Tomoko, a merchant's daughter whose fear of poverty had created such persistent worry that sleep felt like an impossible luxury. And old man Fujiwara, a farmer whose concern for his struggling crops had stolen his peace for 3 growing seasons. What united all these visitors was not just their individual suffering, but their shared amazement at the unprecedented healing environment that the combination of full moon and sacred rain had created. The monastery itself seemed to have been transformed into a living meditation device, with every surface reflecting moonlight and channeling rain sounds in ways that created a constant state of therapeutic resonance. Master Takeshi, who had become the monastery's expert in rain-based meditation practices, observed that the moonlit rain was producing effects that went far beyond normal sleep restoration. Visitors were not merely falling asleep more easily, they were accessing levels of consciousness during sleep that facilitated profound psychological and spiritual healing. Dreams during this period carried exceptional clarity and often contained insights that helped people resolve emotional conflicts that had been troubling them for years. By the 3rd day, the monastery was filled to capacity with seekers who had traveled great distances to experience the celestial rain. Master Kenjiro and his fellow monks worked tirelessly to accommodate everyone. But they noticed that the monastery's healing capacity seemed to expand naturally to meet the demand. Sleeping spaces that should have felt crowded instead radiated perfect tranquility, and the rain sounds somehow adjusted their volume and resonance to provide optimal healing conditions for each individual present. Elder Yasuda, who had become the monastery's teacher of patient observation, spent long hours studying the moonlit rain's unique properties. He discovered that the luminescent quality of the water created visual rhythms that synchronized perfectly with the human brain's natural sleep cycles. Watching the silvery droplets fall induced a gentle form of hypnosis that helped even the most anxious minds release their grip on waking consciousness. The 4th and 5th days brought what Master Kenjiro would later describe as a convergence of healing energies unlike anything recorded in our monastery's history. The full moon reached its absolute peak of luminosity just as the rain achieved its most perfect rhythm and tone. During these nights, visitors reported sleep experiences that transcended ordinary rest and entered the realm of spiritual revelation. Lady Natsuko, whose initial healing had been profound but incomplete, found that her remaining threads of grief were gently dissolved by the moon-blessed waters. She experienced dreams in which she was able to say proper goodbye to her husband, releasing him with love rather than clinging to him with sorrow. Young Tomoko's anxiety about financial security transformed into a deep trust in life's abundant provision. Old man Fujiwara discovered that his worry about his crops had been preventing him from seeing the solutions that were already available to him. Perhaps most remarkably, Master Chen, the elderly scholar whose overactive mind had resisted sleep for years, experienced what he later described as the most educational rest of my life. His dreams during the moonlit rain were filled with synthesized understanding that organized his vast accumulation of knowledge into practical wisdom. He awoke each morning with insights that had eluded him during decades of conscious study. The sixth day brought an unexpected development that would add yet another layer of meaning to this extraordinary week. As evening approached, the monastery's ancient bell tower began to resonate spontaneously with the frequency of the falling rain, creating a deep, harmonious chiming that seemed to emerge from the interaction between moonlight, water, and bronze. This natural bell concert continued throughout the night, adding its voice to the celestial symphony that was healing so many troubled souls. Master Kenjiro spent much of the sixth night in deep meditation, seeking to understand the full significance of what was occurring at his monastery. In his contemplation, he received a vision that revealed the cosmic purpose behind these 7 days of moonlit rain. He saw that certain astronomical alignments create windows of opportunity when the healing power of water can be dramatically amplified by celestial energies. These rare convergences occurred perhaps once in a generation, and their purpose was to demonstrate the full potential of nature-based healing to those who would carry this knowledge into the future. As the 7th and final day dawned, all present at the monastery could sense that this extraordinary period was approaching its culmination. The rain had maintained its luminous quality throughout the week, but now it seemed to glow with an even more intense silver radiance. The moon, though beginning to wane, appeared larger and more present than ever, as if it were reluctant to release its intimate connection with the monastery's healing waters. That final night brought the most profound healing experiences of the entire week. Every visitor present, regardless of how long they had been struggling with sleep disorders or anxiety, experienced what could only be described as perfect rest. Their sleep was so deep and restorative that many awoke feeling as though they had been reborn. The cumulative effect of 7 nights of moonlit rain had not only healed their immediate symptoms, but had actually reset their entire nervous systems to their natural state of peaceful alertness. Lady Natsuko, who had arrived as a woman aged beyond her years by grief and insomnia, departed looking decades younger and carrying herself with the graceful confidence she had possessed before tragedy struck her life. Master Chen returned to his scholarly pursuits with a mind that was both more focused and more at peace. Young Tomoko went back to her family's business with a sense of abundance that attracted prosperity rather than repelling it through worry. Old man Fujiwara returned to his fields with insights that would make his next harvest the most successful in his family's history. When the 7th dawn broke and the luminous rain finally began to fade, Master Kenjiro gathered all the monks and visitors for a ceremony of gratitude. As they stood together in the monastery's main courtyard, watching the last silvery droplets fall from the now clearing sky, he spoke words that would be remembered and repeated for generations. We have been blessed to witness and participate in one of nature's rarest gifts, the convergence of lunar and terrestrial healing energies in perfect harmony. But remember, that while this week has been extraordinary, every rain that falls here carries within it the same essential healing power. The moon has simply shown us what was always present, helping us to see the miraculous nature of what we had begun to take for ordinary. The 7 days of moonlit rain became legendary throughout the land, drawing scholars, healers, and spiritual seekers from across the realm to study the monastery's water-based healing methods. Master Kenjiro and his colleagues carefully documented everything they had observed, creating detailed records that would guide future generations in understanding how celestial cycles could be integrated with natural healing practices. More importantly, the visitors who had experienced those 7 miraculous days became living ambassadors for the Monastery's healing power. They returned to their communities, carrying not only their own restored health, but also the knowledge that profound healing was possible through the simple act of listening to rain with a peaceful heart. Their testimonies inspired countless others to make pilgrimages to the sacred mountain, ensuring that the monastery's mission of bringing restorative sleep and peace to troubled souls would continue to flourish for generations to come. The memory of those 7 days of moonlit rain remained enshrined in the monastery's history as proof that when human suffering encounters nature's healing power under the right celestial conditions, miracles become not only possible, but inevitable. Chapter 8. The Eternal Legacy of Healing Waters. 20 years had passed since Master Kenjiro first received his divine vision beneath the ancient oak tree, and the Monastery of Healing Drain had grown far beyond anything he had originally imagined. What had begun as a single monk's responsee to a mystical calling had evolved into a beacon of hope known throughout the realm and beyond, drawing visitors from distant lands who carried the burdens of sleeplessness, anxiety, and spiritual unrest. The physical monastery had expanded organically over the years, with new buildings and gardens added as the growing number of visitors required additional space. But each addition had been designed according to the same principles that guided the original construction: perfect acoustic harmony with the sound of falling rain, architectural integration with the mountain's natural contours, and a deep respect for the sacred relationship between water and healing consciousness. Master Kenjiro, now in his 70s, moved through the monastery's halls with the graceful wisdom of someone who had dedicated his entire life to a single profound purpose. His hair had silvered like moonlight on water, and his eyes held the deep peace of someone who had witnessed countless miracles of healing. Though his body showed the gentle marks of age, his spirit remained as vibrant as the day he had first consecrated the monastery's stones with rainwater and prayer. The most remarkable aspect of the monastery's evolution was not its physical growth, but the way it had become a living embodiment of collaborative healing wisdom. Each person who had been healed within its walls had contributed something unique to its therapeutic capabilities, creating a collective understanding of rain-based healing that was far more comprehensive than any single teacher could have developed alone. Sister Mei Lin, whose miraculous recovery from anxiety-induced insomnia had been the monastery's first major healing, had returned many times over the years as both pilgrim and teacher. Her gentle presence and deep understanding of the terror that accompanies chronic sleeplessness made her invaluable in helping newly arrived visitors feel safe enough to begin their own healing journey. She had established a network of smaller rain meditation centers in towns throughout the province, each one designed according to principles learned at the mountain monastery. Master Takeshi, whose 49 days of surrender beneath the rain had transformed him from a troubled scholar into a master of healing meditation, had become the monastery's head teacher for intensive retreats. His programs attracted spiritual practitioners from the most rigorous traditions, offering them a path beyond the limitations of effort-based seeking. Under his guidance, hundreds of advanced meditators had discovered that true awakening came not through fierce discipline, but through gentle yielding to nature's own wisdom. Akiko's story had perhaps the most far-reaching impact of all. Her recovery from trauma-induced insomnia had inspired the establishment of specialized programs for those whose sleep had been stolen by terrifying experiences. The monastery now welcomed war veterans, survivors of natural disasters, witnesses to vile ents, and anyone whose nervous system had been overwhelmed by circumstances beyond their control. Her work had demonstrated that even the most severe psychological wounds could be healed through patient exposure to the safety and predictability of sacred rain sounds. Kenji, the former warrior whose transformation had been so complete, had indeed remained at the monastery as its guardian and protector of traumatized souls. His presence provided immediate credibility for military veterans who might otherwise have been skeptical of spiritual healing methods. Under his guidance, the monastery had developed relationships with commanders throughout the realm, ensuring that soldiers returning from difficult campaigns knew of this sanctuary where their invisible wounds could find genuine healing. Elder Yasuda's teaching of the single drop had evolved into an entire philosophy of patient presence that influenced every aspect of the monastery's operations. Visitors now spent their first days simple while observing water in its various forms, from the gentlest drip to the most powerful waterfall, learning that healing, like the natural world itself, operated according to rhythms that could not be forced or hurried. His example had shown that even the most accomplished spiritual seekers could discover new depths of wisdom through humble attention to nature's simplest processes. The legacy of the 7 days of moonlit rain had led to the establishment of a sophisticated understanding of how celestial cycles affected the monastery's healing capacity. Master Kenjiro and his colleagues had learned to predict when conditions would be optimal for specific types of healing work. Scheduling intensive retreats and specialized programs to coincide with astronomical events that amplified the therapeutic properties of rain sounds. But perhaps the most significant development in the monastery's evolution was the emergence of what Master Kenjiro called the Great Network of Healing Waters. Former visitors who had been healed at the monastery had returned to their home communities with both restored health and the knowledge of how to create healing environments using local water sources. Villages throughout the land now featured meditation gardens with fountains, streams, and rain collection systems designed according to principles learned at the mountain sanctuary. These satellite healing centers maintained regular communication with the monastery through a network of traveling teachers who carried advanced techniques and new discoveries to practitioners in distant locations. Every few years, representatives from all these centers would gather at the monastery for intensive training sessions that ensured the purity and effectiveness of the healing methods remained consistent across all locations. The monastery had also become a center for scholarly research into the relationship between sound consciousness and healing. Visiting physicians, philosophers, and spiritual teachers far on distant lands came to study the precise mechanisms by which rain sounds affected human physiology and psychology. Their findings had led to detailed understanding of how different types of water sounds influenced brain wave patterns, hormone production, and nervous system function. This research had practical applications far beyond the monastery's walls. Hospitals had begun installing water features in patient rooms after studies showed that the sound of flowing water reduced recovery times for surgical patients. Schools had added fountains to their meditation gardens after discovering that students exposed to water sounds showed improved concentration and reduced anxiety. Even royal palaces had commissioned rain gardens designed according to monastery principles, recognizing that the well-being of rulers directly affected the prosperity of their realms. As Master Kenjiro reflected on these developments during his daily meditation beneath the ancient oak tree where his journey had begun, he marveled at how his simple vision had grown into a movement that was quietly transforming the way people throughout the land understood the relationship between natural sounds and human well-being. Yet he remained humble about his role in this transformation, understanding that he had merely been an instrument through which ancient wisdom could manifest in forms appropriate for contemporary needs. The monastery's guest records told stories that would have seemed impossible when the first stone was laid. Merchants reported that their business negotiations became more successful after learning to approach them with the patient fluidity they had absorbed from listening to rain. Farmers discovered that crops grew more abundantly when they cultivated them with the same gentle persistence demonstrated by falling water. Artists found that their creativity flowed more freely after their minds had been cleansed by the monastery's healing sounds. Children who visited the monastery with the IR families often showed the most remarkable transformations. Their natural openness to wonder allowed them to absorb the rain's lessons with an ease that sometimes surpassed their parents' more effortful approaches. Many of these young visitors grew up to become healers, teachers, or leaders who integrated the monastery's principles of gentle persistence and patient presence into their life's work. The monastery's influence had even reached the realm of international diplomacy. Several territorial disputes had been resolved through negotiations conducted in rain gardens, designed according to monastery principles, with the gentle sound of water helping to soften the aggressive impulses that often prevent peaceful resolution of conflicts. Ambassadors from distant kingdoms now regularly visited the monastery to learn techniques for maintaining inner peace during challenging negotiations. As the 20th anniversary of the monastery's founding approached, Master Kenjiro began to contemplate the question of succession. Though his health remained strong, he understood that the monastery's mission was larger than any individual teacher and needed to be prepared for continuance beyond his own lifetime. The solution that emerged reflected the collaborative wisdom that had always characterized the monastery's approach to healing. Rather than selecting a single successor, Master Kenjiro worked with his senior colleagues to establish a council of teachers, each specializing in different aspects of rain-based healing, but all united by their commitment to the monastery's founding principles. Sister Mei Lin would oversee programs for anxiety and basic insomnia. Master Takeshi would continue developing advanced meditation practices, Kenji would maintain responsibility for trauma-related healing. Elder Yasuda would preserve the teaching of patient presence, and new teachers trained in the monastery's methods, but bringing their own unique insights, would expand its healing capacity into areas not yet explored. This council structure ensured that the monastery's wisdom would never depend on the vision of a single individual, but would continue to evolve through the collective insights of those who had dedicated their lives to understanding the healing power of sacred rain. Each council member would train multiple successors, creating a resilient network of knowledge that could adapt to changing needs while maintaining the essential principles that made the monastery's healing work so effective. As Master Kenjiro stood in the rain during the evening of the monastery's 20th anniversary, surrounded by hundreds of visitors whose lives had been transformed by their experience of healing waters, he felt a profound sense of completion. His vision had not only been fully realized, but had grown beyond his wildest imagination into a living legacy that would continue to bring peace to troubled souls for generations to come. The gentle rain that fell that evening seemed to see Ari within each drop. The gratitude of every person who had found healing within the monastery's walls. As it soaked into the mountain soil, it nourished the roots of countless plants that would grow to provide shade, beauty, and additional acoustic complexity for future visitors seeking refuge from the storms of anxiety and sleeplessness. In the distance, Master Kenjiro could hear the monastery's bells chiming the hour, their bronze voices harmonizing perfectly with the eternal song of falling rain. The sound carried across the valleys below, reaching villages where former visitors were teaching their own communities the gentle art of finding peace through patient attention to water's wisdom. As the anniversary celebration continued into the night with visitors sharing stories of their healing journeys and expressing gratitude for the monastery's gifts, Master Kenjiro knew that his life's work had achieved something beyond personal fulfillment. He had helped to establish a tradition that would endure as long as rain continued to fall from the sky, offering hope and healing to anyone whose heart was open to receiving the gentle medicine of sacred water sounds. The Monastery of Healing Rain had become more than a place. It had become a living demonstration that human suffering could be transformed through patient exposure to nature's own therapeutic wisdom. And as long as there were souls in need of peace and bodies in need of rest, the healing rains would continue to fall, carrying within their gentle persistence the promise that no darkness was so deep that it could not be washed away by water's eternal light. And so our sacred journey through the 8 mystical tales of the Monastery of Healing Rain comes to a gentle close. From Master Kenjiro's divine vision and the first healing droplet to the eternal legacy of healing waters, each story carries within it profound messages about the power of patience, compassion, and the soul's natural capacity for restoration. The sacred rain has washed away Sister Mei Lin's anxiety, brought peaceful sleep to the sleepless girl. Akiko healed the wounded spirit of warrior Kenji and taught us all the precious lesson of surrendering to nature's gentle wisdom. Through Master Takeshi's 49 days of meditation, Elder Yasuda's teaching of the single drop, and the miraculous 7 days of moonlit rain, we have witnessed how water's eternal song can transform even the deepest suffering into profound peace. As you rest tonight, may these ancient stories remind you that healing is always possible, that peace is your natural birthright, and that somewhere in the sacred mountains, gentle rain continues to fall, carrying within each droplet the promise of restoration for all who open their hearts to receive it. Let the memory of these healing waters accompany you into the realm of dreams where anxiety dissolves like morning mist and sleep comes as naturally as rain returning to the earth. Sleep well, dear soul. The monastery's blessing travels with you always.